Yeah, discussing the Unc Tier List in the VCT, which I think you're ranking at number 3 in the Unc Tier List.
Yeah, I would say number 3.
A clear number 1.
Where would you put Mitch? Mitch would he be considered Unc? I mean, he's a father, but
he's a father. 33. I don't think people consider him an Unc
okay,
yet.
33, you're not an Unc. If you're like 35 and up, you're an Unc?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the audience perspective as well of the youth. Yeah. And I don't think that they perceive Mitch as an Unc quite yet.
That's good for him.
Vans is like insane Unc tier. Crazy. Yeah. The jokes that he's pulling out are sickening.
Yes.
The disgusting.
They're really good
jokes. I mean, my guy, in a way. And then Riv is number 2, and then you're number 3. But
thank you.
You have more of an in touch with the youth quality. You know what I mean? I feel like you don't rebel against what our audience of little children are doing. You accept it. Yeah. And you've accepted your place in the ecosystem.
Yeah, why would you fight it? It's dumb. I don't believe in that. Because I remember, being the youth coming in. And which is crazy that I could say that, and there aren't a lot of people around that could actually say that. But I do remember how it was coming in. I much prefer the way that it is now versus the way that it was back then. At least in my circles and in my world. But humor wise, yeah, man, you gotta adapt, right? If there's one thing that I learned in my time working at G4, funny enough, is that when we are constantly trying to force something to be one way, we end up, alienating everyone around it. And there are some people you don't really want to talk to nor care to talk to, but when you are trying to build something and make it approachable for people to enjoy and watch as gather around at a, I don't know, when you're at the Riot Games Arena or when you're watching with your boys at home or when you're watching with your friends on Discord or whatever. We at least want to try and tap in a little bit to what the conversations that they're having. I think that's important. And I never really understood anyone, and I used to be that way to be fair, but I never understood anyone that was so rigid in that. But I also kind of attribute a lot of that flexibility to you guys because, if it wasn't for Brennan's Sideshow, I don't think I would know half of the internet meme culture things that I ended up learning about. Because I'm not a person who's even though I am on I'm freaking scrolling TikTok or Instagram, I'm looking at politics shit, nerd boring stuff that unks care about, but they're telling me about Jarvis, 4 feet.
Brendan's tapped 45% more of the height of Jarvis.
But it's great. And then, meeting, you taught me a lot about thrifting and seeing you just engage in it, educated me in it and made me curious to learn. So I try and pull things away from everyone that I meet because, we all got some uniqueness to us.
Yeah, our old wrestling tees.
Yeah. I mean, that's my proudest achievement is that I got you back into wrestling.
Yeah, you did. I should have brought my 98 Stone Cold tee to wear for this.
Oh, dude.
I should have done it.
Yeah, and you see, you getting into the thrifting of wrestling clothing got me into looking it up and caring about that
shirts
stuff.
Are so
they're
crazy.
Awesome. They're really good. They're great.
There's the 90s Shawn Michaels Heartbreak.
Is that the one with the glasses, the small glasses?
Yeah, and it's all green one.
He's got the look where he's like this.
Yeah, that one is. I need to get that one eventually, but I can never find it in my size. That being said, though, I do appreciate you getting me into wrestling after years of subconscious interloping. I finally started.
Why were you subconsciously interloping?
Well, your presence in my life since 2020 when I first came to LA, which I don't want to go on a whole aside right now, but I have to say, not to just immediately. Actually, I'm not gonna lie. In my notes, there's a lot of glazing, but not to just not to just do that right away. I will also say, when I first started working in gaming again, or not even working, trying to work in gaming.
Yeah, I remember meeting you at the Philly Fusion House.
Yeah, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had just quit my job. I have to say, and it feels like such a trope to talk about people in LA and especially in the industry being kind of pretentious or stuck up.
Yeah.
There are definitely people that weren't giving me the time of day when I wasn't doing anything. And you were the exact opposite of that.
Well, I appreciate it.
I really appreciated at the time.
Yeah.
And still do. Very welcoming.
I just
and
believe
that helped me a lot.
I just believe in treating people with respect, man.
And it's the same thing when I started working
yeah.
for Riot or on the broadcast, or even when I did that spot at Reykjavik. It was like the first time I did anything, and I was sweating bullets. And you made all that so easy. But now I'm going to stop hyping you up
and tear me down.
But getting me into wrestling, I appreciate that. It is. I genuinely believe it has helped heal my inner child.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest art forms in the world, and people got to stop sleeping on it. It's not. Look, I understand what it is. You know, like you can't not know that it's like just men and women in tights, you know, fake fighting, right? And the results are predetermined. But there's so much more to it, right? There's theater, there's performance, there's things that like people can actually take and extract from it. Like I learned how to do a lot of the things that I do now because I watched Jim Ross and Michael Cole and Jonathan Coachman. I saw what they were doing. I listened to ring announcers like, you know, Garcia? Oh my God. Lillian Garcia, the legend, you know, freaking the Dapper Yapper, Justin Roberts, who I got to work directly with, you know, Excalibur from AEW, learned a ton working with that guy.
And you did commentary with Jim Ross.
And I got to do, I got to, which was a dream come true. And I learned one of the greatest lessons of my life working that show, which was, you know, when you're working commentary or doing anything where you're speaking with someone, just fucking listen, you know, and it sounds so obvious where you're like, well, yeah, obviously I should just listen. But like, one of the problems that I ran into when I first started doing Valorant was I was so obsessed with being right. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? If I'm wrong about something, I can say that I'm wrong, or I can say, hey, I learned something new about this. Now, look, obviously, you don't want to mischaracterize things. You don't want to say something that is just plainly falsely, just inaccurate. Obviously, it goes without saying. That should just be like the basics of it, or so you would think. But I do believe that, like, you know, you stumble, you trip up, you miscall something one time, you know, you just kind of got to like brush it off and move on. And that's what they do in wrestling. They do it so well. You see a wrestler like screw up a spot, like they're getting on the turnbuckle and they slip, you know, and sometimes you're like, oh, damn, you know, they really wanted to get that. And they find a way to get back to that spot to do it again. That is an art form. That is an incredible art form. And as a host, I have to do that a lot as well. You've seen it. We work together where we're like, getting segments chopped up. Like, people don't realize that as we're doing our show, you know, producers are in our ear just like, we're cutting this, we're cutting that, we need this for time, we got to go. And like, that is actively happening, and we actively have to move along with that. And watching professional wrestling and seeing them deal with that in a much more physical form, honestly, gave me the tools, I think, to like understand performance and how to navigate it when the shit hits the fan, because it happens a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
I enjoyed going back and listening to your AEW commentary for some of the events.
I worked so hard for that.
Looking back at your history, it was cool to see you calling like Cody Rhodes versus Darby Allin.
I got that was
Jon Moxley take a barbed wire chair shot.
Or Joey Janela. I got to do the first ever like AEW World Championship match, which will always be a thing that I cherish because I really love AEW. Like, and I love what it does and what it represents for wrestling, regardless of, you know, what any fan may think of like WWE or TNA or whatever. Like, it's silliness. More wrestling is always good. So to have been there at the ground floor doing that and working with guys like Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes, being so kind. Dustin Rhodes, got to give a real special shout out to because he was, I worked with him one time and I learned so much from him in that one time about how to project, how to really make you feel something when you say something. It's truly something incredible. And it's hard because like when you hear these people talk and you're like, oh man, that's really good. You incorporate it yourself and then you kind of feel like you're doing a little bit of that performance. But that's just like the excitement of it all, you know. It's really cool, and I think part of the problem is, and to go back to the thing that you were talking about before with the, you know, like you were enjoying it, you were interloping, like quietly. I just think people just gotta like let themselves enjoy shit. You know what I mean? And I have
You're
enjoyed
an expert
stuff.
at that.
I enjoy things, like life is too short, right? We're all going to be dust one day, and that is dark, and it sucks to hear. So why not just smile and enjoy some shit? Obviously, things are always going to be tough, and you're always going to have to find ways to navigate that. But I do genuinely feel like we are at our best when we're smiling, when we're lifting up one another, when we're trying to like build a space that like we want to be in, That shouldn't be like a difficult thing to do. But in esports, for the longest time, it was because it was such a competitive space. So I just knew I didn't want to contribute to that.
Do you feel that it's less competitive now in terms of the talent space?
I think it's worse. More? I think it's worse. Yeah. But I will say, like, I am very grateful that in VALORANT, like for us in particular in Americas, we don't have to like worry too much about that because like we talk with one another and we're friends and we treat each other as peers. But I do think that like across a variety of games in the industry, it's quite adversarial. And they want it that way. The people who hire, they want it that way because when it's adversarial, you can't collectively bargain together as a unit. They don't want that.
They want us to be crabs in a barrel.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like that in any industry, right? So it's, and especially in a performance-based industry. So when it's performance-based and you're also looking at, like the talent and how you navigate this and who you're bringing on board and all this stuff, you'd want people that aren't going to be working together too much if that is what you're trying to build. But I do believe that there are more people in the space and in the industry that are starting to come in that don't have that mindset, that want to like build with people because they came from the ground floor. They saw what it was like. They worked the lands, the Fragadelphias and the ESL or was it EWC or no, not EWC, lol. Was it the college?
Was that the one in the 2000s?
The Texas ones. Oh man,
ESCA?
ESCA. Yeah. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, your bread and butter. You know what I mean? Or even out in the UK, like where they were doing like their events out there, like I-Series and stuff like that. Like like that. Those people that were like working on those events because they really, really loved esports, like they're now starting to get opportunities where they're moving up, and I'm hopeful that those folks want to make it better.
Yeah, I think that's my generation.
Yeah,
that's my. The late 20s, early 30s, me, Josh, even though, Josh and Bren, they stuck with gaming when I stepped away for some time. But, those were the guys that I came up with at the same time in TF2, met them at I-Series.
Because you guys were, like, going through the trenches. It was a lot like us and the MLG kids, but we didn't realize at the time that, like, we were kind of feeding into a machine that had already, like, left the station. Which was, going straight to the publishers. And while that was like all well and good, it didn't allow for a space for like everyone to flourish. It only allowed a space for a few to flourish. And I think now you're kind of seeing like the product of that now, where it's a very closed off system, despite the claims of it being an open system. So, I would like to get back to a point where like the people kind of take it back and we can have more fun with the games again, rather than like, whatever the hell it is now.
Yeah, I've definitely had some conversations with people that are more in the old head camp of esports and specifically the talent space. And the conversations remind me of, I don't know if you've watched The Sopranos, but in the first episode, Tony has a short monologue where he says something along the lines of, like, I can't help but feel that I got in at the end of this and that the best times are behind us. Like, obviously, referring to the Mafia, which we talk about video games. But
it's kind of like Andy Bernard in The Office when he said, I didn't realize that we were living in the good old days.
People definitely made me feel like, I'm here. I got here at the end, and that it's been better in the past. Do you agree with that?
No. I don't think that is necessarily the case because it is way, way better for people coming in now than it was then, simply just because of the organization and the money that is behind it, right? My first gig, which was MLG Providence 2011, I think, I believe that was the year.
I watched an interview of you there.
Oh, Lord have mercy. That event, I got paid, I believe, a total of $700 or $800 for the entirety of the weekend, right? I worked from, it was like, 9 a.m. and we'd go until we were wrapped. right? Which sometimes would be till like 10 or 11. And those were tough, right? But the thing was at the time, right, I had a full-time job. I was a social worker. This was like the escape. So for me, it was like great I got paid $700 to go and commentate video games all weekend. That is awesome, right? Because at that time, I didn't understand the value of the thing that I was providing. And as I got older and as I continued to work more and as I continued to do more shows where it's very apparent that there is a reliance on me executing, then it was like, oh, wait a minute. No. This is a little bit more involved than what I thought it was initially. And then that's when I started to look for like employment. And that's when I went to IGN and started working there under the IPL banner for a little while. But even that was like, you know, we were still doing a lot of those things wrong. Like, yes, I had a job. Yes, it was going all right. But like we were trying to capitalism our way to like the top, you know. And the problem with esports is it can't always be the hockey stick, you know. Like it just doesn't work that way, right? Like our industry serves a demographic that I don't want to say predominantly sits in the 15 to 18 or whatever, 14 to 18 range, but like, you know, motherfuckers don't got money out there like that to be spending, right? So like you can't operate esports in that capacity where there's like a winner take all attitude. Otherwise, like it ends up becoming just a wasteland. And I kind of feel like it's a wasteland right now in that we don't have enough variety in offerings, but I do feel like the people that are working are making money, right? So it's like when you were coming in, you weren't making what you were making now because you were working like, or not working, but you were doing like community events and stuff like that. It's a big difference now. Right? $700 versus what we make today, big difference. The problem is that a lot of the other aspects of esports has not improved, you know? So it's like,
what?
Well, I think like, you know, scheduling, communication in that regard. It's still very like unnecessarily competitive industry when it doesn't need to be. And the other problem too is that we have this tendency to kind of like look at esports as like one whole, but that's just not how it works. Like I was looking up these numbers because I was like interested in sports betting and how that impacts esports, and it was like
Don't get me started.
Oh yeah, I know.
PJ Washington.
That's your jam. But there was like this whole thing that like esports would 40% of esports revenue would be from sports betting. In like the next 5 or 6 years or something like that, or 10 years. I don't or by 2029, whatever. Point is, that's sad. That's like really bad. That like that's the direction that we feel like we need to go in, and it's because of all the other fundamental things that like we kind of fucked up along the way that contributed to it, you know. And people don't really want to talk about those things. Like, for example, we shouldn't have given Twitch that much power in the esports atmosphere, right? We kind of clipped ourselves at the knees and we weren't able to sell broadcast rights. And I was a part of Twitch. I was like, I contributed to this. So I now looking back and I'm like,
what
damn.
were you doing at Twitch again?
Well, I worked in a variety of different roles. When I left, I was doing talent development for their All-CS. So like I had initially hired like the first crop of like season 1, season 2 talent, and then I had trained them. But before that, I was working publisher developer relations, where I was like meeting with devs and helping to like formulate these leagues and like build these concepts and stuff. So like RLCS, I worked on the development of that. Halo Championship Series, worked on the development of that. Capcom Pro Tour was already going on, but like that was kind of the model for what everyone was like building at Twitch, because the belief was that if Twitch could, as the broadcaster, be the one to get involved in the management of esports, then content goes to Twitch, and then you sell ads against it, and then ipso facto you make a little money. But the problem was that, you know, all those costs were just like going way too high because everything was just getting way too inflated because there was more and more like VC money and just big boy money just getting inflated into our space. Yeah. And we just weren't ready for that. You know, we just weren't ready for it.
So what were the other, to go back, just wanted to ask about that real quick. What are the other fuck ups aside from giving Twitch too much power? Like kind of mid 2010s, right?
Yeah. We went straight to the developers. We went straight to the publisher and the developer. I don't know if that was like, I think a lot of people criticize Valve for the way that they approach esports, but I think that is the less headache of a way. And I know that sounds like weird, so I'll elaborate. But like, Valve is very hands off, right? They provide like money for the international, and it's been like that for years, right? And I'm not saying that those esports are necessarily like flourishing. They're doing okay, right? They're doing quite well, I would imagine. You know, I haven't followed Dota that actively because I've never been into MOBAs, but like, you know, if I'm seeing competitions and people still competing, then clearly something must be going right, you know, even if some things aren't as great as they could be. But I think that what ended up happening was because there was like a desire to go to the publisher and the developer directly because they were the ones that were going to be willing to provide the money to like make these things happen, to make these leagues happen, to make these games and competitions happen. We ended up kind of capitulating to them when they needed to just be the ball, not the sport. Or, you know what I mean? Like they needed to just be the ball manufacturer and let us use the ball. But like then we build the sport around the ball. You know, because like the NFL is a league business, right? But the football, they don't own the football, right? There's the UFL now, or was the XFL and USFL. There's like other ways to do it. But, you know, because we are in a capitalist market, which sounds, oh my God, it sounds so political, but I'll continue forward. But because of the way that it all operates, it all naturally just funnels in one direction, which is kind of what ended up happening. So not everything like what was MLG and ESL and they're all one company now, right? So you don't really have a lot of maneuverability within this space. So now you're really just going to be relying, if you want true grassroots esports, which I do genuinely believe in, you are relying on grassroots individuals to build this. So you're kind of right back where you started. You know, like I did the level 50 LAN, which was a Halo LAN in Vegas last year. And that was the vibe. That was it. It was amazing. It was something you can build upon because people just want to be together. People just want to hang out, watch shit, and enjoy something together, right? And you want to be able to provide a means for them to do that and enjoy it and have a good time with it. Why are we working so hard to like gatekeep it from everyone else, you know, that would just want to participate? I don't really understand that when it could just be a flourishing opportunity economy for everyone, you know. That's what I always thought esports could have been. But unfortunately, it just ended up going to, we need more money, VCs come in. We need more money, crypto bros come in. We need more money, Saudi guys come in. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, you're never gonna get anywhere if you keep taking more money, you know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not an economist, but that's my perspective.
How then would you tie in everything you just said to the Overwatch League and where that ended up?
Yeah.
And then after that to the current VALORANT partnership system?
Yeah. I would say at first, when they told me about Overwatch League, I was like, this is going to fail. This is going to fail. Right away. This is going to fail. Right. Because I knew.
But it's time to get the bag.
But it's time. No, so there were a few things that happened along the way, right? Because, you know, eventually I ended up working with them. I never worked full time with them, but I ended up doing work with them. But that thought, for those wondering, was why I never signed on full time and why when I was going to talk about coming on board in a more permanent capacity, I was being threatened that I would not work in this industry ever again if I didn't take the Overwatch League deal. And I turned it down. Because I had just moved from Twitch back to New York. And then I had met with some folks. I won't name names. It's not necessary to the story. Because in the end of the day, I got what I wanted, which was I didn't want to move back to California after I had just moved and left Twitch. And then uproot my family again, take us back over to LA to go work a show where I wasn't guaranteed a good chunk of the days. Why the hell would I do that? That's insane. So it was like a really weird conversation that ended with this feeling of like, wow, I guess that's not happening. That's how I came out of. And then, some time had passed and then they kind of swung back around. They were like, what if we flew you in and you were here for like a week or 2 weeks and then you just did stuff. And it was like, yeah, that's manageable. But that's the problem it was like that was esports at the time, right? It was a bunch of people, insecure dudes that were just constantly trying to like strong arm individuals because they thought that they could. And reality of the situation is, you know, I always joke about it when we did Four Heads or whenever Brendan Sideshow and us get together, but like, I'm from the Bronx, man. You ain't gonna shake me down. You know what I mean? Like I was a young kid walking down the street and I was caught in the middle of a freaking gang fight. You know, gun firing all over the place. Like I'm sorry, but this is not like your like courtroom bullying boardroom bullying doesn't work on me. So I was glad that I was able to hold my position, but that was an indication of like, oh, that's not, if like that's where you are, and like if me turning you down makes that the statement, that response that is given back to me, I can't possibly think that this is going well. You know, I can't think that this is a thing that's going to end up all right. But then, you know, I ended up getting the Overwatch League offer and rolled up there, and we had a great time. You know, I learned so much working with that team there. But one thing that immediately stuck out to me is, holy shit, this is expensive. There's a big ass LED screen up in that. You're doing concessions. You got staff in the front. You got a lot of things. And, you know, when you look at the way that revenue is generated for leagues and stuff, like, you know, ticket sales and all that, that stuff matters. And season 1 of the Overwatch League did really well. But then you get there for season 2. And then that's when I started to see, like, you know, the upper portion of the rafters emptied out because people were going and they were seeing the same game over and over again. And it was like they launched the Overwatch League without doing the due diligence. And that was always my problem. But the only time where I felt like, okay, there's something here was when I was in Sydney, Australia, doing the Overwatch World Cup. And I got to see the way that the Australian fans were so fucking in to their team. And it was awesome. And it was dope. And then we went to the LA stop, and it was also dope. We got to see all that, like pride and all that stuff. And I thought, okay, this is doable. And then I started working with the New York Excelsior, and I started talking with those guys more. And I really liked what they built in New York. And again, it was doable. But then start cutting at the knees because you spent so much to launch this thing, and you made nothing back. So naturally, in our beautiful capitalist world that we live in, when the suits get together, they're like, we spent a lot of money here. This is a lot. Well, we got to slash these budgets. And then that's when the budget cuts started hitting, and that's when the slashes started coming, because it happens the same way every fucking time. And I will commend Riot, which, you know, like I know people will balk at that maybe, but I will commend Riot for how they did VCT. They started it with, and maybe it was pandemic that kind of forced them into their hand there, but it was smart. You built and you laid out the groundwork of your grassroots initiatives, and you never chop people off of the system. You kind of give them an opportunity in. Now, you know, maybe they need some reform in a couple areas, but like the development of it matters. And I do think that they did a good job of developing and fostering growth, organic growth within their esport that Overwatch League just never did, because we had a banging event at MLG Vegas. That thing was awesome. And we never had another one again. That was it. We never had another one again. Why? Why did we do that? Oh, because the Overwatch League needed to be the only thing around? That's stupid. That was stupid then, and it's stupid now. You can't clip esports. You can't like block the game away from the community. The community should be able to organize and do what they want to do with it, you know? But that's a different conversation that I don't know if it's like possible to have with companies, you know?
It did begin that way in Valorant with the Ignition series, which is when you were doing a lot more commentary.
Oh, God.
I remember going back with Mimi one day, and we were looking at the old events. We went to the FaZe Invitational Finals. Like,
was that like the multi?
GB is casting with Gaskin in the finals of TSM Sen in this tournament.
Yeah, that was the one with the million like OT rounds, right, or something like that. That went up to like 20.
So,
yeah, that was fun.
It was a crazy game. That was one of the best tournaments.
Yeah,
early on.
I was not a very good caster. I needed more work, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel like you've done a good job. Maybe this is just my perspective, and you could touch on it. I feel like you've always been good at, and especially in Valorant now, honing in on your lane.
Yeah.
Like, your hosting is so good. You set everyone up so well.
Thanks, man.
I feel like, again, we're back to the glazing.
You gotta
I
stop.
feel like you've had a good eye for talent and helping people, and I feel like you're in the right role. Did you have to let go of some ego moving into this and giving up doing commentary?
Yeah. Well, I will say the pathway to commentating Valorant was interesting because I was doing a lot of Halo at the time, and I'd always been adverse to hosting, because look, reality is, and let's do some inside esports, baseball, whatever for people, right? Hosts make more money. Hosts make a good amount of money because it's a very important job, what you have to do. And people do not think about what that job entails, which is you are kind of like the point man in a lot of instances. Production's relying on you to make sure that you can, get to where you need to get to. The people that you're working with need to make sure that you are getting them to where you need to get to. So you cannot be a distraction. You cannot be the focus of the desk. That has been my philosophy because there's just too much to do. That why would I possibly make it about me? Now, I could crack some jokes, have some fun, do things that I like to do and that would bring me joy, but that's not my role there. That's not my goal there. So it wasn't about ego, but it was more just understanding what the job was, right? But that's also because I worked as a social worker and I worked in I did different types of work within that field. So I saw what my job role was as a job coach versus what our, job trainer's job was when I was at Goodwill or when I worked as a case manager and I was a junior case manager. What does that imply versus, the case workers that I had worked with, right? There were differences there and I had to identify that. So really it came down to me identifying what the job needed. And in Valorant at the time, what the job needed was just someone to just guide, So when I got there, Copenhagen, and I started to see some of the issues of we weren't talking to each other, we weren't planning things properly. It felt very disjointed. That was my big goal was no, man, let's all work together. We got to make a show for people to enjoy, right? We're getting our ass beat by co-streamers out there, you know what I mean? No disrespect to them. I quite value it, and I've learned to grow because let me tell you, talk about leaning into your old ways. Mimi and Space could tell you, everyone could tell you, I was so anti-co-streamer, right? And the reason why is because very simple, co-streaming affects our work, right? It affects our job, whether or not co-streamers want to admit it or not. Those things impact people's livelihoods. But that does not mean that we reject all of that for the sake of, which was where I was at, where I was down with it all. But I needed to understand that there's an ask here from the community, right? They want something that speaks more authentically to them. And they are seeking out these, co-streamers because they feel like the conversation is more authentically tailored to them. We, as the main show, have a job to do of, telling a broader story, but we got to do it in a way that people can relate to and people could and people could jive with, and they could they could be hey, I really enjoyed this segment, or I really enjoyed this game, or participating in it. So that was a big learning process. But again, it comes to understanding what my role is in that moment in time and how I have to elevate the people that I work with so that this way, when the co-streamer's watching, and they're listening to the point, they make sure oh, hey, that's a good point that Wyatt just made. Oh, that's a good, and it's a small thing, but it's enough to get people to pay attention.
Yeah, personally, I feel like the future for that aspect of the broadcast is being hand in hand, integrating with the co-streamers.
Yeah, in some capacities,
my mind was completely changed on this topic when we were doing a Plat Chat co-stream a few years ago, and Riot said, hey, here's a clean feed of the tournament, and you can use that for your co-stream, so there's not background audio. Immediately realized it was terrible.
Yeah.
We couldn't get 2 rounds in without all thinking and saying, this has no life to it. We're not to the ones driving excitement.
Yeah.
That is coming from the broadcast. Otherwise, it feels like the coolest things could be happening in game, and you're kind of just silently watching it. The life is sucked out of the room. And I immediately, then my perspective on that has been pretty steadfast since then.
Yeah.
That you can't have.
But there's some people who like clean feeds. There's some people who do like that. And I think that for those folks, it's nice to provide an option to them if that option is available or possible, right? But I agree with you. The co-streamers cannot function properly without the actual overarching broadcast existing. And that's not a knock on co-streamers, but it's like, can you, and you know, I love the dude, see him we see him recently, so he's a homie, but like, I think about Tarek when like he gets up and he goes and does something because, you know, my guy's been sitting on the chair for God knows how long, right? You imagine there was no commentary. Imagine that there was no show and it was just like a clean feed.
Viewers are put to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, it fundamentally changes. And look, if they were to provide a clean feed, that's good. But then the way that Tarek does his show, the way that he does his content fundamentally has to change. So there is like a symbiotic relationship that needs to exist here. But the problem is getting the corporate people to understand the value and the symbiosis of that relationship for everyone involved. And that has been the harder part because right, like I have been doing this for almost 15 years-ish at this point, and I'm sure that there's some people who like know my name or know me, right? But for the most part, I'm probably that guy for a lot of people, right? And what I mean is that you ever watch a movie and you know the actor because you've seen their face a million times. Walter Goggins was that guy for like a super long time until like he kind of had a breakout role in Fallout, right? But like there's always that guy. You know, and that was kind of that's how I kind of view myself, right? So we are going to be competing. Is that guy versus Tarek? You know what I mean? And like, and I have a respect for Tarek, and I know that he respects me. We chat and we have a great relationship, but I'm going to lose that battle every single time, right? But it's important that folks like Tarek and folks like, you know, that just do co-streaming in general, right? Your Sliggies of the world and everyone. And I think they do get it. Is like, hey, this needs to be like a symbiotic relationship, right? Like we can't tear each other down. We got to try and like lift each other up. If there's criticism, level criticism is perfectly fine. But like it's important, I think, to look at this as like one whole thing rather than co-streaming, the broadcasts, Plat Chat or podcasting, TikTok. No, it's all together, you know. And the more that we realize that, I think the more we as a community will flourish because other people would find opportunities within that as well. I think.
What do you feel at the moment the Valorant broadcast is doing right, and what needs to be improved? And if you want, you could draw comparisons to other games too, which the folks cannot resist a nice little tantalizing comparison to CSGO or another esport. But
look, I think the thing that Valorant does very well is that it is a zippier show in some respects than other broadcasts are. It does kind of sort of appreciate the viewer's time, right? And everyone that works on that show is very cognizant of that as well. They're very aware. They don't want to be doing something and be like, oh, you know, we're doing this for like 5-6 hours and it's absolute, you know, garbage. I think that has been a great thing that Valorant has done, and it's helped, I think, to kind of help other talent to understand how to say a lot with a little, which is really, really good. It's a good tool and a good skill to have. But if I did have to say an area that I think we're lacking in, I think it's right now just a little bit more flexibility with like, you know, I wanted to do things in the crowd. I want to do things outside. I want to like get more, you know, I want people to see the stuff that we do and be like, damn, that looks really fun. And I want to go there with my friends and I want to experience this. Because there's like, you know, the crew. I love those guys. They're great. They come through all the time to hang out, watch the games, big Sentinels and crew fans. But I see them now. One of them had an MIBR jersey. One of them, like they're embracing it. And that is like what you want. You want people who like genuinely give a shit and like want to come and attend these things, and then you want to put those people on camera, and you want to give, or if they want to, of course, and you want to like highlight that, I think is really cool. And I think we can do more of that, but that's definitely a thing that I want us to be able to do more of. And as far as like comparing to other games, I mean, look, I think that across the board, one of the biggest problems we have in esports is that everyone views the analyst desk as like a stopgap, the thing that holds everyone over until we start the game. And that I think is wrong. And I think we got to change that narrative around. But that comes with people wanting to do that, because there are a lot of people in esports that are just complacent, you know, doing the thing that they're doing because they'll do it for as long as they can. And then however long they last. And they're fine with that. But I do believe genuinely in like leaving it better than the way I found it. So at least in Americas, that's like what I'm trying to push.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, complacency in this space, not ideal. And I certainly would expect you to know that as someone that has done every game under the sun. And I wonder, with your perspective on that, has it been better for you to be able to transition into doing a bunch of different games and bouncing back and forth? Or is it more valuable to just stick to one for as long as you can and really dig into that community?
Yeah. That's a question I have gotten a few times. I would say that at the time, it made sense. So a little insight on me, which I'm sure you know as my friend, is that I have a lot of interests and it goes in a lot of different directions. At any given time, I could be interested in like a variety of different things. That also applies to video games. I had this like big problem when I played Final Fantasy 11 online, where like I would get my character class up to level 35 so that, I think it was, forget what it was, like level 35, so that you can like unlock the ability to make it a subclass, and then I go back and I do the same thing again. And I never got to endgame because I just was so obsessed with like getting everything leveled up that I never did anything else otherwise. But it was because I see something and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. That's probably like ADD, undiagnosed or something. But I had applied that logic to video games because I love Halo. It's my like absolute favorite video game franchise. But when I first started, I was competing in Call of Duty, and that was like where I put my time and attention into. But every single time I'd watch like, even though Walshy's thorn in my side, I would watch his montages, straight ripping montage, like all the Halo 3 stuff. I see Puckett's like top 10 plays, all that stuff, and I'd be like, I want that. I want to do that. I want to be there so bad, whether it's like playing or even later on commentating. So that like interest kind of led me into different games, and then I would see a game that would come out, and I'd be like, oh, that'd be really cool, and then I would go and try and find a way to work in it. And I think that was also the other thing that helped me, was that whenever I like did a different game, it was like I genuinely was interested in it. You know, like I'm never doing something. I have a rule that I don't take a job for something I don't like, right? And and it's not like in that, oh, I hate it, or I just don't know. It's just like, oh, hey, I don't really know much about MOBAs, so it's not a thing that I'm like super into, right? So I've never done League of Legends or Dota. I would like to maybe do like a guest spot one day. That'd be super fun, but I have no desire to like work in that game full time, right? But like if a new game pops up, like Marvel Rivals, for example, even though I don't want to cast in that, but just in general, I see that and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Then I would want to like get involved and learn a little bit about it and learn about the community. And that part was super fun, but it was like applicable for the time, because for the time that was like what was kind of being asked of casters and stuff, was like being able to be nimble. And the more nimble you were, the nimbler rather you were, the more opportunities kind of flung your way. And I benefited from that greatly because of a genuine like desire to like learn. Yeah. But now I look at the way that the industry is, and I'm like, I think if you're able to get a stable gig, hold on to that, because the PAX East shows, all the different like E3 convention events that I would do and stuff like that. That stuff's faded away. And if they are doing it, they're doing it for pennies on the dollar. So like, it's not the same as it once was. So that's why it's like, if you get an opportunity somewhere, like definitely go for it. But I always say though, keep your options open and always learn new things. Like just because you're like hard focused on VALORANT, for example, doesn't mean you shouldn't pay attention to other games. Like, That'd be stupid. You know, like if Brennan Sideshow were hard focused on Overwatch, they would never had seen Valorant. And then who knows what would have happened with those guys, right? And then for a lot of us,
I would have.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
So like
I think about that and it's like you can't be hard focused because that doesn't serve you very well in the end.
Yeah. Compared to all the other games, right now in Valorant, I feel like we're in potentially the middle of its lifespan. If you compare it to other esports, we're like 4 or 5 years in or so.
Yeah, I would say give or take. It's doing relatively well for it.
It's definitely doing well still. Compared to other games that you've seen when they're sort of in this same part of their life, what at this point could cause Valorant to fall off?
Ooh, man. I mean, at this point, stale meta is definitely one of them, right? If you get a stale meta, which thankfully I don't think that that's something that Valorant has worried about too much since the chamber meta. I feel like since the chamber meta and like the Pearl, like the early Pearl meta, it's gotten
They've been
better.
pretty fast to change things.
They're trying to get better about it. So I'll give them some credit in that regard. You know what's the funny thing? It's just interest. That's all it is. It's whether or not people are still interested in the game. And that sounds so trivial, but it's hard to quantify when that point or what that point looks like for the drop off, if you will, because every game is different and every game functions differently, right? Like, for example, like I think League of Legends is a good example of something that's been around for a super long time, but you know, you're seeing a little bit of a decline, but that's also because the game's been around for so long. Right. And eventually people age out of it, move on from a game, want to try something new, get attached to something new. Right. But they still come back to games like League of Legends. But that frequency isn't as often. But when you look at the reality of it all and what we were talking about before with number must always go up. Right. You see that and you think League of Legends is dying. And it's like, no, it's not. If anything, it's actually showing that it's stable. And I'd rather something that's stable than something that, you know, like Fortnite, for example, that had a crazy growth spurt and then fell right back down. Nowhere to go. Right. And I remember vividly walking with executives at Epic Games and they're like talking to me. And I'm, again, not going to name names, but maybe one day for the book. And I'm joking. But I remember one of the executives looked at me in the windows of my soul and said, hey, man, you ready to do this Fortnite World Cup thing every year? And I looked at him and I said, you bet your ass I am.
I'm going to look at the Goldenboy Fortnite Liquidpedia, see if he worked the World Cup 2024.
Yeah, I mean, and
that
look,
happened, right? 2023? That happened,
yeah,
right?
that totally
2022,
happened.
that happened.
Yeah. And look, I'm not trying to knock Fortnite because I think they did a lot of really cool things as well. I think there's always a thing that you can extract from something that is unique and cool. But man, oh man, if that is not a playbook of what not to do, I don't know what is. You know, shoot for the moon and then you end up in the mud. And then they got to dig themselves back out, and they have. And it's been great to see FNCS kind of evolve a bit more, and the players still continue to stick with it. But it definitely, like, you had such a big moment. It's hard to replicate that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is deviating a little bit, but this is something that's been on my mind a lot. Honestly, I think the entire time I've been doing Valorant, and this is from being on the broadcast to Plat Chat, other content. What is your take on where the line is for criticizing the players?
That's a big one. Yeah. It's been a problem for a long time. Because look, you know, I ain't going to sugarcoat it. Players are soft, right? They're soft. They might get a little mad at me about that, but you know, look.
See, that's where sometimes it feels that way. And other times, one thing aside from any of the practicing required, the competing, the dedication, I respect the vulnerability of being a pro player.
For sure.
And I don't think that is something that's really mentioned, but to get up on stage in front of a crowd and you have a game where you're just the worst player in the server. Yeah. That's a very vulnerable place to be.
And I want to be clear here.
I respect that.
And I want to be clear here. When I say players are soft, I don't mean it and I know it sounds quite disrespectful, and I could see how someone would be mad about that. So it's fine if they're mad at me for it. But I say that in that to kind of echo what you were pointing out here, right? There are a lot of insecure young men who are participating in esports right now. And a lot of their insecurities sometimes are very much pronounced, and you could see it. But sometimes people look at it as a superpower. They look at it as a cool thing, or whatever, however you look at it, right? But I having been around the block now, I could see it. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's got some, he's got some attachment issues, or he's got some, pick me attitude. You know what I mean? Like, oh boy, this is quite problematic. That being said, though,
I can see it because I was that when I was like 20.
Well, because I was
whatever,
too.
yeah.
I was too, right? But the thing that is important to note is that they are going out there time and time again and kind of just laying it all out there because they have to, right? They have no other choice, right, as players. So I can understand their sensitivity to the topic at hand because as a commentator and as a host and all that, I too also was very sensitive to the feedback and criticism that I had gotten at that time. The thing, though, that I think players need to kind of come to a better understanding of is and this is also an important thing. It's not just the players. And I want to be very clear here. It's also the talent too, right? I won't say names, but many years ago, I was in a talent meeting. We were getting ready for an event, and it was not VALORANT. So just to kind of squash that one, and a caster came in, and he was relatively new. And he had said in the meeting, he was like, we were talking about like how to navigate criticism or how to like fairly, judge something or so on and so forth. And the guy was like, yeah, but like, if they do something fucking dumb, we can say that they're stupid, right? And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you? No, that's not how this works. Like, they're an athlete, athlete in that they're a performer. They're doing their thing. They're trying to execute on these things. Just like things happen. You blunder, you mess up, whatever, right? But that doesn't mean you call them stupid or whatever, right? And that's an extreme example, but like a lot of people don't have the mental maturity to go beyond that kind of critique of an individual. And those are the ones that are the loudest of everyone else. And, I think that oftentimes that kind of critique gets conflated and combined with analytical critique. And then it kind of just all gets jumbled up. And then sometimes you have people who genuinely just like say stupid things and on the analytical critiquing side too. So they're not absolved of it. But players, I think, do have to kind of accept that, to what I was saying before, this is a all-encompassing thing, right? The casters, the hosts, the podcasters, the people who are the co-streamers, all of it is it's all one thing. So like if you cut yourself off to all the other aspects of the of your game and of your space, well, naturally those negative criticisms are going to come out because you are not getting in front of that conversation as well, right? So I think more players need to be more active, and I know it's uncomfortable, but they need to be speaking more. They need to be on camera more, doing interviews more. Even the ones that are quiet need to be doing things, and it's tough because you're like, you don't want to force anyone to do something that they don't want, but you also don't want people to feel like they're not getting the full story. And I think players need to do a better job of like commanding that. So it's a little bit of both. It's everyone. It's not just and because casters are soft too. Like talent are probably the softest. Like I've seen so much insecurity just on talent alone. So like I'm speaking from a position of understanding where like I know where that insecurity comes from and where that pressure comes from because it is mounting.
I feel the same way. I've had a lot of moments, especially more early on, and I would quickly feel embarrassed after for being too harsh. And then also going like, let me take a deep breath. Who am I? Yeah. I have the luxury of sitting in my ivory tower and reacting. Yeah. And that's easy.
Yeah.
That's an easy place to be in. And again, reacting, there's no vulnerability in that. You're not really putting yourself out there to be critiqued. You're just
because even if you're like wrong, it doesn't matter, right? If you're like a little wrong, it doesn't matter, right? But the player, they got to deal with the results of that. So that's why I'm saying it's like I understand that aspect of players' grievances with the criticism, but I do think that like they have to kind of understand, and the talent need to kind of understand that there's like a way that you talk and treat this. And it doesn't need to be adversarial. It doesn't need to be that way. And the fact that like pro sports and sports media make it adversarial, they do that for.
Oh my God! I mean,
they
like
do it for
Stephen
content.
A and LeBron right now.
That's for
ridiculous.
content. That's purely for content, right?
It's so silly.
But you have to ask yourself, what do you want to contribute to? Do you want to contribute to a conversation that is inherently negative and built upon tearing people down? Or do you want to contribute to a conversation that is built upon, building individuals up, critiquing things, but finding value in certain aspects and then trying to like be better from there? And I know that sounds like really utopian, but like,
I know what you mean though. How have you been able to manage with people trying to tear you down, which I think has come due to the fact that you have been someone that has hopped around from game to game and people have their tribalism feelings when that occurs. Like particularly, I remember you telling me a story about when you were in Rainbow Six and you had reversed 2 players' names.
Pengu
and that was
Fabian.
Yeah, and that was a game that you had just gotten into. Was that the first event you were doing?
Yeah. So
and then people were very upset.
Yes. And hey, they have every right to be, right? But I don't think that they fully understood the reality of what had happened, right? People always find a reason to tear you down. So do the best you can. And that's all I can do. That's all I could do in that scenario,
Yeah. And I see you say too that was a moment where you can give the lesson of it's okay to mess up in public.
Oh yeah,
for everyone to
I've
see
had
you
plenty
mess
of
up.
fuck ups. I mean, there was the other fuck up that I had when I did the Boston Major for Counter-Strike, and I was announcing. I mean, me and Anders had worked through this whole thing. It was super sick, and then I had like did the walkout for FaZe, fucking nailed that shit, and then I was getting ready for the next one, and I was like, "From the United States of America!" I was super stoked, and then out of nowhere, I could not hear myself anymore because the audio in the house was so deafening that I went and it was bad, and I thought my career was over. I remember calling my wife and shivering and just being like, "This is it. I'm done. Like no one's ever going to trust me in that moment ever again." And then I did, the Overwatch League finals.
Then you walked out the Barclays Center.
Then I walked out the Barclays.
11,000 people.
So
what's that experience like?
Humbling.
You're waiting.
Yeah.
You know you're about to go out. You go through the tunnel. There's 11,000 people looking at you.
Yeah. That one. So here's the funny part. Didn't know that because Kevin, our stage producer, who's a good friend of ours and a good friend of mine, love that dude to death. One of the best stage managers I've ever worked with. He saw me pacing outside because I had done a hit in the center when I like in the pre-show where they wanted me to talk about because they were really leaning on me being from New York. So I was doing like a ton of like he's a New Yorker bit, right? And one of those was I had gone to Barclays to watch Monday Night Raw, and The Rock showed up, and that's when he did that promo with Rusev and like beat Rusev in like a couple seconds. So that one, I was talking about that. And at the time, like, things were filling out, but we were like 30 minutes till showtime. So I was like, okay, we're going to have a lot of people maybe on the floor, but I don't think we're going to fill out the upper part. So I just kind of locked that away, and then I moved on. And then I'm pacing around. And then Kevin comes up to me and was like, "Hey, man, how you doing?" I was like, "I'm good. I'm a little nervous." He was like, "Don't be. Barely anyone's out there." I was like, "Okay, cool." I was like, "Yeah, I figured it." I was like, "Yeah, I figured as much." He was like, Yeah. Like, you're good. Don't worry about it." And he told me that because he looked outside and he was like, "Holy shit, there's a lot of people here. And I don't want Alex to get nervous." But then when they opened the door for that whole moment and I walked out and I got to see it and the way that people reacted from me, and my mom was there, my dad was there. It was cool. So it was it gets me emotional even thinking about it now. But
it was very cool. I had never seen that before.
Yeah,
and it was very cool to watch back. And I think appropriately so, definitely leaning into the New York roots
for sure.
On that one.
But you know what it is, man? Is I love being from New York. You know, I love being a New Yorker. Like even today I was wrestling with what hat to wear because I was like, I don't know, man, I kind of want to wear my Brooklyn hat, because I love being from New York and I love sharing that with people because I feel like part of the reason why I've had so much success in my life was because of my upbringing. It's because I was brought up in the Bronx. It's because I was a Puerto Rican kid. It's because I was from New York. And like, I've always used that as a superpower. When everyone wants to tear it down, I'm like, hey, this is who I am. And to have been able to have leaned into that moment. And I'm very appreciative they gave me that opportunity. And I was, and to your point about talent work and all this stuff, when they told me that I wasn't going to be desk hosting the Overwatch League finals, I thought that I failed. I was like, oh my God, I messed up. I was not good enough for the desk on either of the days. And then I discovered no, it was because they just wanted to put me in this role, right? So I give them credit, you know, like they, at the time, I wish they had articulated it to me a little bit better, but looking back on it, I'm so glad that that's the position I had.
Yeah. You had said, I'm just checking to get the specifics, but you had said when you grow up in the Bronx, the reality is the ghetto is all around you. You become that. You adapt to that.
Yeah.
Do you want to expand on what you meant by that? And
Damn, I said that?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And even how that kind of relates to, you know, what you had said when you came out at the Barclays Center and you know, just being 5 stops away or 5 blocks away.
5 stops. 5 stops. Yeah, 5 stops away on the N train. Well, N and Q. But yeah, you know, I think that it's because I wasn't supposed to do this, you know? Like, it sounds weird, but like, and I don't know, it's like a really weird time to talk about things like this, but having grown up, like I grew up on welfare, right? My mom worked 2 jobs, went to school, right? Like social service programs literally kept us alive, you know? In a time when that's being like torn down so much. So it's hard for me to like think about these things, but it gives me a lot of strength because it's like, I know what it was like to wake up and see my mom like struggle, see her single mom try to make it work, you know? I know what it was like to see my brother struggle, right? You know, trying to be the new man of the house and trying to like survive and all this stuff. So when you grow up with such strong figures in your life, which I'm so grateful for, but then you kind of walk out and see the rest of the world around you, it kind of reinforces you with a ton of values that you never really thought you would have developed otherwise. And I'm glad I had them in my life to have given me those values, because then I went out into the world and I saw what was good and what was bad and what I could take that could benefit me in a positive way and what I could kind of leave behind, right? And when I first started, I was very like obsessed with the idea of like being clean, being like, you know, because I know what I am, right? I'm a Hispanic guy, you know. I don't look like your atypical broadcaster, even though some people say I look like Mike Tirico. But like, you know, I don't look like your atypical broadcaster. So I knew that I had to work harder in that regard to kind of like get people to notice me. But it wasn't working. I was like doing the same thing as everyone else. And it wasn't until I started letting me be me and stop putting me behind a wall and like act and like putting me behind a wall and like telling people this is who I am. And I actually decided I want to be who I am. I want to be who I am on camera. Who I am talking to you is, as you know, is who I am when we're doing our show, right? These conversations that I have, it kind of feels like if we didn't have a microphone, we'd be having these conversations anyway, you know? That I think is what makes me me. But it's the ability to be able to go to someone and just talk to them real, you know? That's a thing that I learned where I grew up, seeing people do that, you know? It's tough. It's a hard thing to navigate because you never know when's the right time to do it, when's the right time to be like 100% authentically you, when's the time to dial it back. But that's a skill that you develop over time. And that is something that I've learned over time. So I know when I'm with you guys, I could be 100% authentically me. But I know when I'm like going to, you know, a show and I'm working with like a new crew, hey, you know, dial it back a little bit. But I'm still me, right? I'm still the me on camera, make my jokes, say my wisecracks. But I think like it's just about not being afraid of who you are. And everyone has a uniqueness to them. Even if you grew up in the middle of nowhere, USA versus the middle of nowhere in a big city, right? Like you we all have like a uniqueness to ourselves, you know. And I think I told you that as well, right? And I think about you and Mimi. I think about Brendan, Josh. I think about our whole team across all of Valorant, and I'm like, wow, like there's so many unique voices, you know, because that's what you want. You don't want everyone to sound the same. It's boring.
Yeah. I think the majority of the people that are going to watch this are people from Valorant, and they just know you from Valorant, which you have been pretty committed to for the last 5 years, but don't necessarily know the long list of credentials, the man with the most Liquipedia pages, like every single game you're one of the only people that, maybe this is my limited knowledge, we don't have to get into it, but that I know of that has mainstream credits as well, working with All Elite Wrestling,
it's a very
working on
low
the
amount,
Rocks show on NBC, the Titan games, which the games that show was crazy, by the way.
That was an experience. I still can't believe I did that.
Pulling like 350-pound boulders.
Yeah, I still can't believe that was a thing that I lived through.
That was a crazy. Yeah, I mean, that show was crazy.
We can do a whole episode just talking about that. That was like, it was crazy.
Yeah, but then to go back to the roots and you saying, you know, something to the effect of on Richard Lewis's show that video games kept you off the street.
Yeah,
like. With a statement like that, or me saying that back to you, where does that take you to mentally? Like, what memories does that elicit?
Oh man, me and my brother playing, what was it? A WWF Warzone on the PlayStation 1. We were making our creative characters. So fun. We'd play that till like the break night. You know what I mean? It was the best thing to do. And that's always what I think about, because you know, a lot of the parents at my mom, because my mom was very active with, and I didn't know this, so she was really smart about it. But my mom was incredibly active within the Parent Teachers Association and stuff in my neighborhood and my school. And all the parents were telling her that she was crazy for using video games as a means to keep us off the street. And my mom would say, at 8 p.m., I know exactly where my boys are. No questions asked. And she was right. Where were we? In our rooms. I was playing my Sega Genesis. My brother was playing his Super Nintendo. Then he got the N64, bastard. And then, and then he kept that from me for way too long. It was unfair. And then I finally was able to get my own. But I got a Sega Saturn, great console. But that was my mom's philosophy. And I give her credit because it was a very progressive way of thinking about. And look, it doesn't work for everyone, but like it worked for us. And I think, we turned out all right.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned even I wanted to circle back to it because there was a lot to get into previously, but even what you said about, what was it, walking home and, being caught in a gang shooting. I mean, that.
Yeah, my stepfather
speak about that.
Jumped on me while that was going on. It was like right on the block where I live, because where I used to live in Brook Avenue, it used to be known as like the piano district. They used to make pianos and like antique furniture there. And there was like these warehouses that were empty for years as I was a kid growing up. And that's where a lot of like, some gang violence and stuff like that would happen around there. And then one day we were coming home from, I think it was like this store called VIM. It was like a clothing shoe store in the Bronx. Shout out to anyone who knows that. And as we were walking down out of nowhere, just like gunfire just started blaring. And my stepfather, not my biological father, the man who came into my life and just, wanted to be more present, and someone who I loved very deeply, he jumped right on me and kept me protected from that. But that was like, again, when you grow up in that, and that's like what you're around and what you see, a lot of the other stuff kind of becomes very trivial, and you're just like, whatever, you want to gatekeep me from this opportunity? Sure, man, whatever. I don't want to work with you anyway. Like that's how the mindset you had to have. So that helped me to reinforce a stronger, more confident mindset, because I never believe in being disrespectful, but I do believe in standing your ground, so all that stuff kind of reinforced it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like that's part of where you've been able to just sort of inherently shed the ego?
Probably, yeah, because I think to go back to your question, you had asked about the ego earlier, and it's weird because it's like there's a lot of things that removed my ego, so to speak. One of them was when I was first coming up, my uncle, he had told me, and because my mom had reached out and they were worried about me because I was spending so much time on this website called gamebattles.com. And I was playing a lot of matches there, and I was like trying to make it as a pro gamer. And my uncle, who is concerned about it as well, because they didn't understand it, he pulled me aside one day and he was like, "Hey, Papa, you gotta, I don't know if this is the right course of action for you because, not a lot of people like us make it out there doing this stuff." And that pissed me off. So I just wanted to prove him wrong. And I did it, But all that stuff kind of like helps you. And you could say that's ego that drives that for sure. But I would go as far as to say that it was more, I just had a willingness to do something that wasn't what was only just expected of me, right? I worked at a warehouse. I did the profit jobs. I did the retail jobs. I did the desk jobs. I did all the things that were like asked of me, but every single time it was like the siren's call. It just kept calling me back every single time, and I couldn't escape it. So yeah, I had to.
Where do you think alternate timeline Alex Mendez is right now? If you had checked your Instagram DMs and saw that Triple H told Michael Cole, who told Mike Rome to message you about auditioning for the WWE as a ring announcer.
Honestly, man, I don't know, but I think that I still think I wouldn't have done it.
Really?
Yeah, because you see, at the time, if I was given like a good deal, maybe, but at the time, I knew what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to commentate, and I really wanted to be like in the action. So if they were like giving me like interviewer jobs or something like that, I probably would have turned it down, which would have been stupid of me because I should have taken it. But that's because I was like, again, like I had ego in other areas, right? I had ego in myself. I always believed that I could just do it. And then if I failed, I'd be like, okay, well, maybe I didn't work too well. But it was like this blind, burning desire to like just succeed. It's really bizarre. But I do think that I would have at least given it a try. I would have auditioned for sure. And honestly, I probably would have done okay because, look, in my experience, what I've learned is if you just go be 100% your authentic self, but be respectful, be mindful, don't just like project everything you are onto people, but be open to being open more, right? You will find success, and I probably would have gotten like a callback. Like I do genuinely believe I would have gotten a callback, but
that Are You Ready at the Overwatch, what was it? Like the Overwatch League Finals for the last Owl? Yeah. No, you hit that. I understand why that went through the grapevine.
Yeah, and it was a great moment, and I'm very grateful that I even had that opportunity to do it. But I also am like, damn, that would have been fun to explore at least. But I'm also glad that I got to do AEW and I got to do Titan Games. If I did WWE, I don't think I would have been able to do those things. So I'm glad. I'm glad
it all ended up working out.
Yeah,
maybe Alex. Somewhere in a different timeline.
Yeah, but I do believe that me in a different timeline is still the same person. I'm stubborn and I am very tenacious when I want to be. And, I think maybe I probably still would have found some way to do some crazy, unique bullshit and made some money off of it.
Do you remember what it was like to commentate your first game at MLG, which I believe was like MLG Providence 2011?
Yeah.
Like what was the feeling going up and then after that?
So I can't remember the exact feeling of it while it was happening, but I do remember the feeling before, and it was nervousness, it was excitement. But I'll tell you what, after it happened, I looked over at Corey Dunn, who was my first ever co-commentator. Love that man to death. He's one of the most talented men I've ever worked with. And I looked at him and I go, Corey, how was that, man? And he goes, absolute shit. And then I was like, are you serious? He was like, nah, man, I'm just fucking with you. He was like, you were good. And then from there, it was like a friendship was formed, and we've been doing it ever since. Yeah, that was a cool.
It was funny too because again, there are so many interviews of you. If you Google Alex Goldenboy Mendez interview. The amount of 2011 to 2014, someone with a 10-minute interview, someone holding a mic at an MLG event. Me, man. There were so many of those. But that one was funny to listen to. And you said in that you were asked by the interviewer the games that you started with, and I know the Shadowrun, but specifically, you were like, COD 2, and you were like, my history in gaming, or like my history in this space is beginning with COD, and it's going to end with COD.
Yeah, I thought that. I thought that.
I'm going to imagine that's not what you're thinking anymore.
No, not by a long shot.
Where do you think it's at? Where do you think it's at now? The updated 2025 view.
Wow. Thought about that a lot, because I'm 37. And even though, like, I'm just 37, I'm also 37. So it's like in video games, that could be a death sentence. But I'll be honest with you, man, I don't want to view it that way. I love this stuff, and I still think I have something to offer. So I'm going to stick around as much as I can, but I know eventually, like, the phone will stop ringing, and I'm okay with that. A core thing that I've held on to, like I have a few life lesson things that I stick to that have guided me very well in my life. And one of those life lessons, on top of never giving people that excuse, is being okay when it's over. A lot of people don't know how to let it go, and I'm okay if it ends and Riot's like, hey, man, you're too bald, you're too old, you're too gray. We don't want you on the show anymore. I'm okay with that, right? Because I also know, too, that I got to put in...
Vins is, what, 42?
Yeah, but, I got to put in a little bit of work, too. You know what I mean? Like, I gotta make sure that I'm not walking on set looking like a decrepit, falling apart human being, right? There's effort that I need to put into it as well. But I'm also, like, very understanding. Like, when it's my time to be done, I'll know it's my time to be done. And it ain't going to be Call of Duty.
You're not jumping back to COD?
Nah, don't think that's going to happen. There were a few times it could have happened, but I just think that game's like gone too far past a point where a person like me would work in that space. And I'm okay with that, Yeah.
If you have a lasting impression or something that you hope people take away when it is said and done, and when you don't get another call, what do you hope that's going to be?
I hope that it's that I never was a burden for anyone, and I always did the thing that was asked of me, because ultimately, like, that's really all it is. It's a job. Right? Yes, I love the fact that I get to talk on a camera and I get to share my passion for video games with millions of people in my life. And it is quite staggering to have people come up to you and be like, yo, man, I was watching you since I was a kid. How old are you? Oh, I'm 23. Oh, how long you been watching me? 10 years. Oh, my God, you were 13. Now I can go and have a drink with you. Oh, good Lord. That's the thing. That's like, it weighs. But I don't know. I want the impression always to be, honestly, I don't really even care about the people. Like, I care about the people I work with, but in the end, I just want people to look back and just be like, hey, that guy contributed something positive, to the industry and actually, like, gave a shit. Because I do. I just want you guys to be okay. Because when I started, there was no one there that was, like, talking about us being okay. We had to figure it out on our own. And I don't believe in that. I think that if there's a way for us to hold the ladder down, then we can do that and let everyone come up.
One final quick question.
Yeah.
Cena or Cody? Who's taking it?
Cena all day, okay. Number 17.
And I'm with you. And we're all good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Thank you for coming by. I feel like we could have gone for another.
Yeah, we could have. Honestly, we could have
gone. Goddamn hours.
We could have gone more.